It basically is the way that our neurobiology, our brain stem, also our gut. Your gut is actually known as your second brain. It has so many neurons inside it. That's why when you get nervous, what hurts, right? What hurts? Y'all are gonna have to talk today. Your stomach hurts, right? You're like, oh, I don't feel good, or I got something going on. And that's because you have so many neurons inside your body and also inside your gut. And the neuron basically looks like a tree, right? It has like the roots of the tree, which are called the axons, and then it has the branches of the tree, which are called the dendrites. And when we're born, we have very rudimentary tree trunks, if you will, of a neuron. And as we get experience and things change, our neurons basically begin to grow. And they go from a very sickly looking tree, right, to basically what we would consider to be a healthy neuron. And this process occurs, to get to this point, occurs from the age from 0 to basically 3, where all your neurons are just exploding of growth through growth of your body. And every time that you learn something, and every time that you experience something, and every stimulus you get, basically grows your neurology. And the amount of stimulus you get is how big your neurology grows. And the type of stimulus you get also is based on what grows. So for example, let me ask you a question. Can anyone play an instrument in here? Okay, raise your hand like you're proud, raise it. Can anybody play a song by memory? Raise your hand, okay? How do you learn how to play a song by memory without having to read the notes? What do you have to do? You have to practice. You gotta do it over and over and over again. Well, that's the way the neuron works. As you do something, you grow little parts of your neuron. It literally is not, this is not theoretical, this is physiological. When you do something, you literally are growing little neurons, right, inside your brain that are connected to your experience. So think about it. You're playing the piano, you practice over and over and over again, you're building neurons connected to that song. There is literally, I don't know what song you've learned how to play, there is literally neurological growth inside your brain related to that song. Isn't that fascinating? Begin to get the picture. We think of the macro, but now we're going to the micro. Think about that all your experiences are encompassed in these neurons that have been created inside your mind and inside your gut based on your experiences. So let's talk a little bit about the parts of your brain that are growing in this, because the reality is most of us think of our neurology as the frontal cortex, but there's so much more going on. So what happens is the way our brains grow, it actually starts from the bottom up, which is your brainstem. Brainstem is sort of the foundation. Brainstem is the what we call the reptilian brain. It's the oldest part of your brain. Even shrimp have this little neurological thing that's almost like a little brainstem that helps them digest and everything like that. So we have that in us. It's our body. It's connected to our bodies. Our brainstem receives information all the time, and then it sends it out. Raise your hands. Raise them high like you mean it. Full class participation. You are now using your brainstem to raise your hands in this moment. The brainstem is this connection that literally runs through all of our senses and everything. And then as you go up the brainstem, you actually get to this really important part called the limbic system. The limbic system it kind of sits in between your ears, and it's this little part. It's kind of like a small little size inside your brain, but basically it's all the emotional side of your brain. The limbic system has the hippocampus, the hypothalamus, the thalamus, and the amygdala. And all of these go together to create basically what we would consider to be emotions. The limbic system is sort of the emotional side. It's also nonverbal. The limbic system doesn't use words to feel. The limbic system just feels. They're sensations. If you ever think about when you're angry or you're upset or you have something going on, a lot of times we're like, okay, this is very real, but I can't even express how it is, right? I think in the Bible it talks about groanings and we can't even find the words to use. That's the limbic system. And then the frontal cortex is sort of the last part to develop. And this is called the mammalian brain. The mammalian brain is where we kind of get into this amazing what it means to be human, what it means to have this intelligence that it's able to, I don't know, understand chemistry and physics, to be able to have languages, to be able to use tools. We as humans have the most developed brain system, and to be able to, my favorite part is to be able to talk about the brain using our brain. We are using our brain right now to talk about our brain and conceptualize it. That's crazy that we're able to do that. That's the frontal cortex. But in our experiences, all of our experiences that we're going through, everything that we did from 0 to 3, and as we grow up, all this information literally grows our brain. And it doesn't just grow the frontal cortex, which is what we consider to be our brain. It also grows the amygdala. It also grows the brainstem. All the experiences that you had as a child, things you don't even remember, helped build our brain. So, let me explain how this works really quick. So let's say I'm driving down the road and I see something, and all of a sudden my eyes see it. It's a car coming over into my lane. My eyes process the information in the back of my brain, and then all the information has to go to first, you want to know where it has to go first? To this little thing called the amygdala. And it has to go to the amygdala because the amygdala is deciding, is it safe, is it not safe? And the amygdala has, as its file cabinet of experience, all the information, all your life's experiences are encompassed, and the amygdala has to decide, how am I going to respond to this? And the amygdala has the ability to activate the sympathetic, which is the emotional side of our body, to keep us safe. So the sympathetic nervous system gets activated when a car comes over. You're driving, you see it. The amygdala activates your hands and your body through the sympathetic nervous system so that you swerve, right? And then, once you're safe, then your frontal cortex comes online, which is where language lives and knowledge and all this stuff. And then you go, whoa, that guy almost hit me. Whoa, scary, right? The point is your brain is so much more than you think it is. Your neurology is so much more than you think it is. You think it's this. But things are happening every day based on your experiences that are being determined by your brainstem and by your amygdala all the time. And most of the time, we don't even know that it's controlling us. Most of the time, we're completely unaware of it. We're functioning based on our experience, right? In mechanisms and ways that we may not even realize it. And so today is just an opportunity for us to dig deeper into this. Dig deeper into what this neurology is and how God not only has to redeem our frontal cortex, but in reality, he has to redeem all of it. I'm talking body sensations, the way we function with our arms. You know, there's some parts of us that when we think about our body, we may see it as like, this is just a sinful vessel that I just have to deal with. But the reality is that God also redeems the body. Not to the point that we want him to, right? Like, we all will suffer. We all have back pain, and, you know, we know that we are in a broken world, but God redeems the body. And not only does he want you to grow in the knowledge of him, but guess what? He also wants to redeem your emotions. It's not just about knowledge. It's about how do we interact with our world, with what we are given in our neurology, into be able to do what he wants us to do. So if you want to think back to who or what helped form your neurology, you got to go back to 0 to 3. Because 0 to 3 is kind of the age where all this stuff starts happening. In fact, research will say that by the time you're 3 years old, your disposition to how you're going to relate to other people has already been established. By the time, hear me again. If you were, I teach this at an adoption agency, I would make you all write this down, but I know none of you have pens, so it doesn't matter. But that by the time you're 3 years old, your disposition of how you're going to interact with the world has already been established. Isn't that crazy? And scary. I mean, that based on those early experiences with our parents, on how they raised us, how they did or did not meet our needs, not just our physical needs, but how they did or did not meet our emotional needs, how they did or did not meet our intellectual needs. All the things that our parents did or didn't do gave us a disposition of how we were going to interact with the world for the rest of our lives. A trajectory that would set us into motion before we even knew any of it. We were already, I guess, ready to go. Or some of us not ready to go, to be real honest with you, right? But those early experiences formed us to create that. For those of you who are in my training, I want to bring up this next slide. It's called the attachment spectrum. And this is where it gets a little bit tricky. Because if you really are honest and you want to spend some time to really, and I never want to say that what our parents did was bad, I'm just going to say that sometimes our parents had maladaptive skills, right? Parents are imperfect, 100%. I'm telling you right now. For those of you who still think your parents are perfect, just spend a little more time with them. It'll work itself out. But the attachment spectrum basically says that most of our interactions with the world don't usually fall in what we call secure attachment. That most of us have insecure attachment. And attachment basically is like a spectrum. And so if you look at the blue, that's a underreactive attachment, which means I don't have a lot of, I don't want to get too complex here. If a child is in a place where the parents aren't meeting their emotional needs or aren't showing up when they're in need, right? Think about the needs. You're hungry, you're sad, you're scared, you have all these things. If a parent isn't showing up in those times of needs, then what happens is the child doesn't build strong attachments toward the parent, right? Because attachment is built as when I have a need and you meet my need, guess what? I like you showing up in my life. You mean something important to me. Oh, you have a need, and then I meet your need, that all of a sudden now you care more about me, right? When someone meets my need and they show up in time of need, my neurology says, I'm in discomfort, but when this person shows up in my world, I go from discomfort to what? Comfort. So now I have a disposition that says, I like to be close to people. But if you grow up where parents aren't showing up for you, then guess what doesn't happen neurologically in your brain? You don't have a connection that says, hey, people are pleasurable. People are good. People showing up in my life is a good thing. In fact, you may have more of a blue, which is, people don't really mean that much to me. They haven't really shown up, so I don't have this connection of pleasure from people. Or maybe you grew up in the red. The red is chaos, it's emotion, it's anger, it's frustration. For those of you who grew up in a home like that, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's parents who are frustrated, and they would use maybe a loud voice, or they would be aggressive. And that's called an overreactive attachment, which means that I'm not secure in myself, so I need the whole world to organize themselves to make sure that I'm good. And I'm going to make sure that if you don't do that, I'm going to make sure you do that. You need to change this, and you need to change that, and I'm not happy if you don't do this. And so constantly, I'm just forcing everybody to acquiesce to what I need. And so then you, as a child, if this was your family, you grow up with basically the mirror image, or at least a reaction to what you grew up with. You begin to see how this plays out neurologically, right? And if you haven't done the work of going back and recognizing, and I would never say we are going to go back and look at how bad our parents were. No, that's not what this is about at all. This is about just being honest. It's just about being truthful. You don't have to make up stories or have something else. You can just say, yeah, my parents, my mom or my dad, they had trouble with their emotions. They were kind of always angry or frustrated. There was a lot of emotional tension. And it's not that it's horrible, it's just a reality. Like, okay, that's what I grew up with. And then also, or maybe, my dad was in the military and he traveled all the time and he didn't have the ability to be there for me when I really needed it. So you're right. Like maybe I didn't, so I kind of had to learn how to be independent, do it myself. I had to be self-sufficient. Or maybe you've gone through abuse or neglect or anything even more severe. And so you'll have trust issues, defensiveness, all these things that we acquire, right, before the age of 3. Yeah, right? Like, before we even know. And the worst part is, that's when our parents were probably the worst at parenting, right? That's like when they didn't know what they were doing. That's when they were in the middle of their career. They were in the middle of stress. And so we're picking up these neurological dispositions kind of at the worst time. Romans 7:19-25. Let's see if I'm doing this right. Says, although I want to do good, evil is right there with me. For in my inner being, I delight in God's law, but I see another law at work in me, waging war against the law of my mind and making me prisoner of the law of sin at work within me. The neurobiology of sin, I think I messed up in my direction here. Did I do this right? Let's go back one. Is that we were crafted and created with broken and sinful people. We were surrounded by them. Our parents are broken and sinful people. And although we may have inherited some of the best parts of our parents, we also inherited some of the sinful parts of our parents. Maybe the tendencies for anger, frustration. Maybe the tendency to be the disposition to just not be open or willing to connect with others. All the things that we would say are, if we really are honest, we would say like that was painful. And the pain made us as organisms react to create and organize our world. Now, us surviving, and the other thing that's going to really happen is when you really get into this, the moment you go to your parents, well, guess what? Go find out what their childhood was like. Because their childhood, was probably similar or worse than what you experienced. And then you go back generations and you can see why it says that, the sin of the father goes down 2 or 3 generations. Because neurology, that's the way it works. That's not even the Bible, that's what science is telling us. That you pick up the attachment style of your parents, and then you perpetuate that, and then you raise your kids that way, and then they raise their kids that way, and it literally just goes down generation of generation. A generation of angry people who are frustrated and unhappy in their life, or a generation of cold, materialistic, trying to seek the power, prestige, whatever it is, we just literally donate it, sadly, and we give it to our kids so that they can continue this legacy of sin, however that is that it looks. Whatever your weapon of sin is, that's what you literally are inheriting to your children. Your anger, your temper, whatever it is, you just literally, and although you don't want to do that, the reality is that by the time they're 3, they've already got it. Whoa. See, the problem is so much bigger than we realize, right? Like, as Paul said, it's inside of me. I had this whole other sermon. I've had 4 sermons, and I've just keep changing them. I had this older sermon of think about the people in the Bible who inherited their neurology from their parents. Think of Peter. Temper Peter, right? The man who's ready to fight all the time, right? Or Israel, Jacob. I wrestled with God. Think about, this is not just us. This is all of humanity that they pick up the neurology of their parents and they carry this into the world with a trajectory of how am I going to interact with this world. I basically have my weapons of choice, the things that I've been donated, the way my social skills or lack of social skills, whatever it is, and that's how I'm going to face this world, and now I'm going into it that way. It's funny, we'll talk about salvation. And probably I would say, raise your hand if you accepted Christ before the age of 18. Raise your hand. Okay, I assume most of you, a lot of us, accepted Christ before the age of 18. So you have your spiritual crisis moment, the moment where you say, okay, I can't do this anymore. I need help. Lord, please, I need you to guide me. Please be my salvation, whatever your story is. Guess when your neurological crisis is going to happen? Anyone want to guess? It's not 18. It's not before 18. It's when you get married. So let me explain this. a secure neurochemistry has a capacity for love. The more secure you are, the more your capacity to love is. The more insecure you are in your neurochemistry, let's go back to the cold over here. Let's go back to cold first so I stay in rhythm here. Think about how difficult it is to love if you haven't been loved, or to be in a relationship with someone who has a difficulty expressing love. It's really challenging. Or think about when you're in a relationship with someone who's in the red. That's really hard. They're always frustrated, angry. And think about how hard it is to be in a relationship if you're that person. Everyone's frustrating you. And so neurology, it coincides with intimacy. It's like, you don't think of it this way. Because society will say brain, all that stuff is about intelligence. It's about IQ. It's about the conceptualized ideas. And we celebrate athletes who can do all these great things with their body using their mind. And we just pay millions of dollars to celebrities who can make us feel good and they can act out and everything like that. But that's not really what neurology was based on. Neurology was based on connection and relationship. Our neurology, we were designed to be intimate social beings. We don't do well when we are alone. We're isolated. When you're alone, isolation creates a slew of neurological and mental health problems. So the reality is that intimacy and neurology sort of live together. And so the first time when you start that intimate relationship and you get married, all of a sudden now, you have I don't know how else to explain it, but like now your neurology is placed under a load, right? Like now my neurology has to show up because now I'm in an intimate relationship with someone else. I have to meet their needs and also meet my needs. And I got to do it in such a way that I'm not such a jerk that this person just doesn't want to be around me anymore. And that's really hard for our neurology. We're real good at meeting our own needs when we're alone, right? Like that's fine. But once you get into a relationship, into intimacy, now your neurological system, all the deficits, all the brokenness, all the sin that you acquired from your family are going to show up in that moment. And you're going to be looking at your spouse a week after your honeymoon going, dear God, what have we done, right? Like, I don't even know if I have the capacity to make this work. I don't even know if I can do this. I don't even know if I have inside me the ability to truly love you. And I'm not sure, as I look, to be honest with you, I'm not sure you even have the true ability to love me. Right? Does anyone know what I'm talking about? Am I the only one who went through this experience? Right? No, not at all. Because I know that when you entered into this intimate relationship, that's when all the rubber meets the road of do you have the capacity to love? See, I can convince all y'all of how great I am. I can manipulate you when I'm at work, and I can come across as this amazing person. All this stuff, that's not difficult. In fact, that's actually not that hard for me. But what's really hard, where it really gets difficult, is when I have to show love to the same person every day, that I have to look them in the eye and find it inside myself to say, even though I'm tired, even though I'm worn out, I have to give to this person and take care of their needs. It's in that intimacy that our neurological deficits are revealed. So let's what's my next slide? The moment of truth. What are you going to do? Neurologically, we will be brought to our knees. We will be faced with realities that maybe we don't have what it takes. That maybe sometimes I do have a temper. That maybe sometimes when I say something, I sound just like my dad, right? Or that maybe sometimes I've lost the ability to be compassionate. And we're faced with the same decision that we're faced in salvation. Do you want to be led by God or do you not? Are you willing to lay it down or are you not? And so every time that I'm faced with my own neurological deficits in the way that maybe I don't do something right, or I'm dishonest, or I'm manipulative, or I'm doing things for my own benefit, not the benefit of other people, and I'm faced with that truth, the reality is we already have a similar process of accepting Christ that we have to lay it down. And so it is again with neurology. We lay it down. We say, okay, God. We fall on our knees and say, okay, God, I screwed that up. I didn't do that right. I hurt the people I loved. I said that incorrectly. That wasn't what I meant to do, but man, I sure did that. And in this moment, we have a decision. Do we want to go ahead and find courage to grow, to change? Or do we just say, hey, this is the way I was raised, right? This is the way my parents raised me. I turned out fine, right? And we do this. It happens all the time. We're faced with our own sinful neurology, our own sinful habits, our own everything, and we hurt somebody or something reveals to us, and we're in that moment, we can decide, do we lay it down and say, okay, or do we say, nope, I'm doing it my way? For those of you who are going to do it your way, the sermon has ended for you. I mean it. I love to say it's not, but really the sermon is over. Because you will continue to find your security in the things that you find your security in. You will say, this is the way I was raised, this is how we did it, I'm not changing, and you will continue to live out your trajectory the way that you want it to be done, and you will live with the consequences of your own neurological sin, and so it is. So be it. I mean, I promise you, I'm a counselor, a licensed counselor in the state of Texas, and one of the most important things that I have to figure out is, do you really want to change? When I'm working with someone, if they don't want to change, it's a waste of my time. And I'm not saying that through compassion and care, people don't come to a place where they're scared and then they grow. But like, if people are unwilling to change, then there's nothing you can do. And their life plays out like a tragedy. And we see it all the time. People who are so afraid, resistant, defensive, committed to their own system, their marriage crumbles, the relationship with their kids falls apart, they lose their jobs, or maybe they're super successful, but it's an odd success. It's a success that's managed by manipulation. And so it works good enough for them, and they will play out the rest of their journey that way. And, you know, I'm sure some of them are saved, and God has saved them, but the reality is that the redemption process is cut short. But then there are some people who say, okay, I don't know if I can change this. I don't even know. Like, this is the way I was raised. This is the way my family did it. This is what I acquired. Like, this is a good thing. Look how much money I'm making, or whatever it is that your little mind plays tricks on. But at some point, you just come to this point of pause, and you say, okay, God, what you got? What do you got for me? I'm not sure I'm doing it right. I'm willing to just at least shut my mouth and listen, if that's the best we can do. I remember in my early marriage, a situation, it was probably 6 years into my marriage. We're about to celebrate 20 years, my wife and I. And I remember a situation where my sons were young. I think my oldest son, Ben, was like 3 years old, and my youngest son, Nate, had just been born. And, you know, those are really stressful times in marriage. And I remember a lot of tension and anger and frustration, a lot of yelling between my wife and I. And I remember one day just like being done. And not like done with the marriage, but like done with my own neurology. Like, I just don't think I can do this. I don't know how to do this. Like, how am I, what is happening? I remember at that point in my journey, I decided, like, okay, God, like, I assumed that you meant to put my wife and I together. But it doesn't feel that way right now. And so I need your help. I need you to help me. And so I just invited the Holy Spirit into my relationship. I said, okay, Holy Spirit, if you have something you want me to do, if there's something that you can do to change this, I'm willing to let you lead me. I am surrendering myself. Things that I don't even know about myself, but now I'm being revealed of how big of a jerk I am. Or I didn't even know this, right? I didn't even know how broken my neurology was until I got married. And all of a sudden now, in this moment, so I remember, some days passed, and I'm in this argument with my wife, and all of a sudden I'm like, okay, Holy Spirit, if you got something to say it. And all of a sudden, the words, I'm sorry, came out of my mouth. As clear as day, and this is a very honest and true story. The words, I'm sorry, comes out of my mouth. And I'm like, what? Who said that? Like, that was not me. That's not what I'm feeling. I'm not feeling I'm sorry. And the Holy Spirit's like, really? Like, I can do this. I can heal. I can restore your relationship. I know you better than you know yourself. And all you have to do, Bill, is let me lead. And I get to learn. And I get to see where this Holy Spirit takes me. And then all of a sudden I realized, like, wow, number one, God obviously does care about my marriage. Number two, the Holy Spirit just made me say something that I normally don't say. And it just stopped me in my tracks. And that's what happens. As we stop and say, okay, God, I don't have the ability to go further, but if you have something for me, then so be it. Teach my neurology something new. Then all of a sudden, the Holy Spirit pops in to our life and literally says, okay, let's do this. Let's redeem you. I love this where we talk about for the word, which I like to say the Spirit, because sometimes we think for the word is of God is alive and active. We think just the Bible, right? Like, oh, the word, I read the word, and it's, no. This is an active and living word that the Holy Spirit, in the moment of arguments with your wife, in the moment where you're frustrated with your kids, in the moment where you're struggling, the Holy Spirit will come to you because he is active and living, and he will show up in your life immediately. And he will say, oh, I got some new words for you. I got a different neurology than what you're doing. And all I have to do is ask for it. If a loving father is going to give the fish, how much more will your loving father give you the Holy Spirit if you what? Ask for it. All you got to do is ask. Holy Spirit, I need your help with this relationship. I'm not asking you, you may be praying for more holiness. I'm praying to survive my relationships, right? I'm just praying, God, help me get through what it means to be a husband, what it means to be a boss, what it means to be a parent. Help me get through this because I don't do that well with this. And it literally says he's alive and active. He is sharper than any double-edged sword. He penetrates, dividing soul and spirit, joints and marrow. He judges the thoughts and attitudes of the heart. When I do counseling, I bring a sledgehammer to the party, like, okay, it looks like you're angry at your dad, right? Like, yes, I understand that. The Holy Spirit penetrates us. He knows every part of our being. He knows all the little intricacies and the nuances and why we're afraid of something when we don't even know why we're afraid of something and why we're being triggered by this. And he literally comes in and he says, okay, Bill, let's rearrange this. Let's clean this up. Kind of like Bruno cleaning up this room, right? That's what he does. And his healing, his redemption is tailor-made to my sin. Like, he knows me. He literally begins the process of healing. So I want to teach you something called neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity basically is that our brains are always being rewired. So this is just part of who we are. So all the time, my neurons, basically, which are constantly interacting with new information, right, are growing and changing and everything like that. And so when I encounter new information, then my neurons will grow differently. I mean, thank God that we're not the same people we were 20 years ago, or for some of you who are younger, you continue to develop. Do you know the age at which sort of the brain is fully matured? It's not 18. Who said 25? Because you went to my training, didn't you? That's right, 25. The journey, you cannot, so for those of you who are young, you have time to develop into who you are. 18 is a legal age, but adulthood neurologically is 25. When did Christ start his ministry? He was 30 years old. The Son of God waited till he was 30. And so what this means is that you are constantly rewiring yourself. The idea is you need to pay attention to what you're paying attention to. Because what you're putting in is what you're going to get out. That's the way neurons work. The way you cannot be in a place where you're in the cold and then just confirming that, yep, it's all about money, because guess what? It will never change. Neuroplasticity says that I have to introduce new things into my life that are going to help me change the way my brain works. And it starts with the work of the Holy Spirit, and then he begins to change us, and then we begin to alter ourselves, right? More and more into the image of Christ, more and more into the person who I'm supposed to be, more and more into the person he wants me to be, and actually a little bit less than what I want me to be. That's the neurobiology of redemption. The neurobiology of redemption is that I give myself to the Holy Spirit's leading, that he can alter and change me and grow. Does that make sense, everybody? Y'all still with me? You already thinking about it? Okay. So this is what we want redemption to look like. We want it to be beautiful and precious, and I'm just going to read my Bible in the morning, and God's going to change who I am, and that's the way it's going to work. And I'm just going to, listen to I don't know what beautiful music you listen to. I listen to Enya. Enya's this very beautiful music that's so relaxing, and it's ethereal, and that's how God changes my neurology. Nope. You know where neurobiology redemption occurs? It's back in the family. This is the part I hate about God. He always takes us back. We got to go back. He takes us through. Think of Moses. Moses is like, I'm out of here. And what does God do? He's like, Moses, you're going back, buddy. You don't get to heal your neurobiology until you try to attempt to be in intimate relationships again. And this is where the neurobiological redemption occurs. It's in the chaos of family. We want to run away from the pain and say, okay, that was not good, so now I'm just going to run away from it, and I'm not going to associate with it at all, or I'm going to stay away from it. Or if you're in the red, you're going to get in there, and you're going to manage and control it all and everything, and the Holy Spirit's like, yeah, neither of those things are going to work. You don't get to just run away and not face it, but you also don't just to be so angry and upset that it always just controls you. Because the reality is if we don't find a way to find Christ as our security, we're still slaves to our neurology. Our neurological past still has and manages us and controls us. And until we're able to bring it back to the Holy Spirit and say, help me get through this. And he says, yeah, we're going to kind of like we talked about, we're going to release that. We're going to have to forgive about this. We're going to have to find love in this way. You're going to have to change the way you talk to people, Bill, because that's not going to work. And he continues to redeem us. And the moment is we really begin to experience what we call freedom. His freedom. His freedom doesn't say, well, this is the way I do it, or I'm not willing to do this, or this is what matters to me. He changes us so that we can be free and able to, in a sense, be able to love. He changes our capacity to love. That's what he does. And it doesn't look pretty, and it doesn't look easy, and it's not hard, it's not fun because it's tough. But at the end of the day, the ultimate sign of neurology, and this is what science tells you, not necessarily even the Bible, but the Bible confirms it, is our ability to seek out connection and maintain relationships with other people. When you talk about raising your kids, you can talk about, I want them to be lawyers and doctors, I want them to be rich, I want them to be successful, I want them to do that. No. What we want for our kids is that they can be in a relationship with other people, that they have the capacity to love. This is what God draws us to. This is who he wants us to be. This is how he creates us. And that I don't have so much insecurity that I can love the people I like, but everyone else, you're on your own. No. God teaches me and takes me to a secure place to say I can love people who potentially are the most challenging, people who are the ones that are hardest for me. And most importantly, I need God's help to be able to love my family. I need to be able to love my wife. There has been no one in my life who has been more redemptive to me than my wife. And she hasn't done it always in the nicest, kindest ways. But her words of speaking into me say, Bill, the way you handled that was not okay. Bill, you need to think about this again. Bill, man, that probably isn't going to work for you anymore. And if I'm willing to listen, I begin to say, you know what, she's right. She's right. That's not how this works. God, Pastor Cal has great sermons, right? And we have these great leaders in the church and all this stuff. But if you really want to learn about your neurological deficits and allow God to redeem you, you start by listening to your wife, your spouse, your husband. You start to listen to your kids. Because they'll tell you, Dad, you work too much. Dad, you're not here anymore. Dad, you're not doing this. And all of a sudden you're like, wow, you're right. I didn't even think about that. Man, Holy Spirit, help me be a better husband. Help me be a better father. Help me to be able to love people the way that I need to love them. Isn't that cool? Let me tell you as I close why God heals us. Grace always precedes growth. His love first comes and he accepts us and he loves us unconditionally. And our neurology needs to know that. We need to know that we are safe and secure in his arms. Until I know that I am safe and secure in his arms, I am still living in my insecurity. And once I understand that I'm safe and loved in the arms of Christ, then now, guess what? There's work to be done. I get to participate in God's kingdom now in a different way, that I'm not stuck in my own past. I get to say, okay, God, what are you doing? You're freeing me up to do stuff. What is it you want me to do, Lord? What? To preach a service at Lantana? I haven't preached in 20 years. Cool, let's do this, right? Like, think about how the places God will take you if you are no longer under your own neurology, but you're in line with his. And he brings the kingdom to you so that you can love other people. Don't we have an amazing God who loves us and knows us to the deepest part of who we are? And he accepts you even though he knows everything about you. Sometimes we let our shame keep us down, but all we need to do is run to him as our Father, because he is our Father. And we go to him with our broken pieces and say, okay, God, can you fix this? I need you to fix these broken things in my life that I have done. Can you please help me and heal me? And he is a good Father. And he will give you the Holy Spirit. And he will say, you better believe it, buddy. I'm right there with you. And he scoops us up in his arms. He says, I love you and I care for you. And I have incredible plans for you. You are loved. You are mine. And all we have to do is say, hey, I need your help. Okay. Se terminó.